Get out, you lowlife. Those were the last words my father ever said to me, before I walked out of that house and into my brand new $26 million Florida villa. The funny part? He didn't even know I'd already sold my startup for more money than he'd make in 10 lifetimes. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need screaming, it just needs silence and success. If you've ever been told you're not enough, that you'll never make it, hit that like button. Because today, you're about to hear how I turned rejection into power, silence into victory, and pain into the sweetest revenge of all. My name is Emily, and I'll never forget the way my father's voice echoed that night. Get out, you lowlife. Those words didn't just kick me out of my home, they kicked me out of my old life. The funny part? He had no idea that the daughter he called a failure had just become a multimillionaire. But let's rewind a little. I grew up in a house where academic achievement was religion. My father, Dr. Richard Caldwell, was a tenured physics professor. My mother, Dr. Evelyn Caldwell, a research biochemist. Even my brother, Thomas, had just finished his PhD at Stanford. And then there was me, the creative disappointment. I was the girl who doodled up ideas in the margins of my chemistry notebook. The one who asked why one too many times. The one who didn't fit neatly into their scientific mold. At family dinners, conversations weren't about feelings or movies or memories, they were about publications, funding, and who got tenure this year. If you couldn't contribute to that, you didn't belong at the table. Still, I tried. God knows I tried. I enrolled in engineering because it was close enough to something my parents respected. But while everyone else obsessed over formulas, I obsessed over possibility. I spent nights in my dorm room coding prototypes for an app that connected small business owners with digital freelancers. My professors told me it was too ambitious for a sophomore. My father told me, focus on real work, Emily. Fantasy doesn't pay rent. But I couldn't stop. Every time I opened my laptop, I felt alive. Every little bug fix, every new feature, every small victory, it all meant something. It wasn't about rebelling. It was about belonging to something that finally felt mine. Then came sophomore year spring break. While my classmates were in Miami or LA, I was in a small cafe with my friend Olivia, pitching my half-finished app to a group of small business owners. By the end of that week, 5 of them signed up for the beta version. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy. That same weekend, I made the scariest decision of my life. I dropped out of college. When I told my parents, the room went silent, like the world had stopped spinning. My mom just stared at me, blinking, her fork frozen midair. My dad leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said in a voice colder than the Florida rain. You're throwing away everything. You have a full scholarship. A future. And for what? Some app idea? Dad, it's not just an idea. It's growing. People want it. He cut me off, his tone sharp. Do you hear yourself? You sound delusional. We raised you better than this. Then came the words that would haunt me for weeks. You'll regret this, Emily. You'll come crawling back when you fail. I didn't cry that night. I didn't even argue. I just quietly walked out of the house, laptop in hand, and drove off into the dark. For months, I lived small, really small. I rented a studio apartment the size of my old bedroom closet. I ate ramen noodles, coded through the night, and slept on a mattress I bought off Facebook Marketplace. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Every day, my app grew a little stronger. Every week, a few more users signed up. And slowly, quietly, the idea that made my father call me a lowlife started paying my rent. Still, the sting of his words lingered. Every time I looked at my empty bank account or an investor rejection email, I heard his voice again. You'll regret this. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. The future doesn't belong to those who follow the rules. It belongs to those who rewrite them. Fast forward 2 years. I'd built a small team, just me, Olivia, and 2 developers I found online. We were running the app out of a co-working space with peeling paint and bad coffee, but we had something no one could measure in GPA points: momentum. That's when it happened. A major venture capitalist, someone who'd seen our beta on Reddit, asked for a meeting. At first, I thought it was a joke. But when he wired the $3.5 million seed investment 2 weeks later, I knew my life had just changed forever. From that moment on, everything was a blur. We expanded, rebranded, went international. 6 months later, a major tech company reached out with an acquisition offer. The number on the screen didn't look real. $26 million. I stared at it for a full minute, then laughed. My roommate thought I'd lost my mind. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The same week I signed the deal, my father called me out of the blue. He didn't know about the sale yet. He just knew I hadn't been home in over 2 years. "Emily," he said coldly. "Your mother's been worried. What are you even doing with your life?" I told him the truth. "I'm doing great, Dad. Better than you'd imagine." He chuckled, that same condescending tone I knew too well. "Doing great? You're a college dropout with a hobby. Come home before you embarrass yourself further." That's when I realized nothing I said would ever matter. Not words. Not promises. Not potential. Only proof. So, that night, I quietly called a realtor in Miami. And within 48 hours, I moved into a $26 million beachfront villa overlooking Biscayne Bay. No grand announcement. No social media posts. Just me, my success, and the sound of the waves reminding me that silence can be the loudest revenge. For 3 quiet weeks, I lived like a ghost in my new villa. No calls. No texts. No explanations. Every morning, I'd walk barefoot along the beach with my coffee, watching the sunrise stretch over the water. I'd run my fingers along the marble railings, still half expecting to wake up back in my cramped apartment. It didn't feel like revenge, yet. It felt like freedom with an echo. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A journalist from a local business magazine reached out for an interview. He'd heard about the 23-year-old woman who built a $26 million tech startup from her dorm room. I almost declined. But something inside me whispered, "Tell your story, Emily." So I did. I talked about the nights I coded until sunrise, the rejection, the doubt, the loneliness. I never mentioned my family by name. But I didn't have to. The internet has a way of connecting dots. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, it was trending on Twitter. I didn't even know my parents had seen it until I got a call from my brother, Thomas. "Emily?" His voice cracked slightly. "Mom's crying. Dad's been pacing the living room all morning." I stayed silent. "Emily," he continued softly, "they saw the article. The house, the deal, everything. They can't believe it." I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said, "They didn't believe in me when it mattered, Thomas." He sighed. "You should have told them." I almost laughed. Would they have listened? He didn't answer. That evening, I got an email from my mother. Just one line. "Emily, your father didn't mean what he said. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness twist inside me. For years, I'd begged for validation. Now, I had the kind they couldn't ignore: headlines and zeros. Later that night, Olivia and I sat on the patio, wine glasses in hand, watching the reflection of city lights on the ocean. She smirked and said, "So, how does it feel to be famous?" I smiled faintly. "Honestly? It feels like karma took its time, but she finally showed up." The next morning, my phone buzzed again, this time, from my father. For a full minute, I just stared at his name lighting up the screen. When I finally answered, his voice was shaky. "Emily, we need to talk." I didn't realize how wrong I was. I closed my eyes. The waves crashed softly outside the open window. For the first time in my life, he sounded small. And that's when I knew, this wasn't just success. This was power. 2 days after my father's unexpected call, I saw a black sedan pulling up to my driveway. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my villa, I recognized that unmistakable silhouette, rigid posture, gray suit, the same frown he wore the night he disowned me. My parents had come. I didn't rush to the door. For a moment, I just stood there, barefoot on the marble floor, staring at the reflection of the ocean behind me. The last time we'd spoken, he'd called me a lowlife. Now he was standing outside a $26 million proof that he'd been wrong. When I opened the door, my mother gasped softly. "Emily, this place." Her voice trembled like she was afraid to breathe too loudly, as if money itself might shatter the illusion. My father looked around, jaw tight. "So this is what you've been doing," he said, tone flat. "All of this, for what? To show us up?" I met his gaze. "No, Dad. I built this because you told me I couldn't." For a second, the air between us crackled, pride, guilt, and years of silence colliding. He looked older, somehow smaller, like time had weighed him down with regret he refused to name. Mom stepped closer, eyes watering. "We were scared, Emily. You were so young. Dropping out, it felt like you were throwing your life away." I took a breath, steady but sharp. "You didn't protect me, Mom. You dismissed me. You made me feel like my dreams were a disease." She flinched. Even my father looked away. We sat by the glass wall overlooking the bay, the silence heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, Dad spoke, quieter this time. "You proved us wrong. But success doesn't erase disrespect. You should have told us." "That did it." My composure cracked. "Why would I? The moment I stopped fitting into your idea of perfect, you threw me out. You didn't ask if I had a plan. You didn't even ask if I was okay. You just screamed 'get out,' like I was nothing." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. For once, Dr. Richard Caldwell, the man who always had the last word, had none. The waves outside crashed against the rocks as the truth finally broke through the silence. I looked at them and said softly, "You taught me to chase excellence. I just did it my way. And you hated me for it, until it made headlines." Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. My father exhaled, his voice almost breaking. "Emily. I was wrong. I didn't need the apology, but hearing it still made my chest tighten." I stood, walking toward the window, watching the sunlight ripple on the water. "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about worth. And I finally know mine." Behind me, neither of them spoke. Because deep down, they finally knew it too. A week after that tense reunion, I received an invitation to speak at a Tech Innovators Gala in Miami. The organizers wanted me to deliver the keynote speech about resilience and entrepreneurship. I hesitated at first, public speaking wasn't my thing. But when I learned who one of the event's honorary guests would be, my lips curved into a slow smile. Dr. Richard Caldwell. My father. The same man who once told me I'd embarrass myself trying to chase fantasy over science. It wasn't fate, it was poetic symmetry. The night of the gala, the ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and the hum of conversation filled the air. My parents sat in the front row. My father wore the same stern face he'd worn at every school ceremony I'd ever attended, only this time, I wasn't the student. I was the main event. When the host introduced me, the crowd rose in applause. I walked onto the stage, heart pounding, not with fear, but power. I began softly. 2 years ago, I was told I'd never make it. That dropping out was failure. But sometimes, failure is the universe's way of redirecting you. I looked straight at my father. Because when people doubt you, they give you something money can't buy, motivation. A murmur rippled through the audience. I saw my mother glance at him nervously. I continued, my voice steady. Tonight, I dedicate this talk to anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. Remember, validation from others is temporary. But self-belief? That's forever. The applause was thunderous. Every camera flash felt like justice, every cheer like a lifetime of dismissal finally being undone. After the speech, journalists swarmed me for photos and interviews. One headline the next morning read, "Disowned dropout becomes Florida's youngest tech millionaire, parents once called her a lowlife." The article went viral overnight. My father's university colleagues saw it. His students saw it. His dean forwarded it with congratulations, the irony so thick you could choke on it. For the first time in his life, he was the one in my shadow. A few days later, he called again. His tone was quieter, humbled. "Emily, the university board asked if you'd be interested in consulting for their new innovation program." I paused, letting that irony sink in. The same institution that laughed at me for leaving college now wanted me to teach others how to succeed without it. "Thanks, Dad," I said, a faint smile in my voice. "But I think I'll pass. I prefer real-world experience to theory." He didn't argue. He just sighed, a sound halfway between regret and acceptance. And that's when I realized. I didn't need to scream, punish, or prove anything anymore. My success had already done it for me. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about showing them I could rise without their approval. And I had. A month after the gala, the house felt unusually quiet. The frenzy had passed. The interview slowed. But inside me, peace had finally settled where pain used to live. I'd spent so many years chasing validation that I forgot what silence sounded like when it wasn't filled with doubt. Now, when I woke up to the sound of waves brushing against the shore, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt freedom. One morning, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, formal, almost old-fashioned. It was from my father. His words were neat, deliberate, like every syllable had been revised a dozen times before the ink hit the page. "Emily, I was wrong to measure your worth by my standards. I see now that success takes many forms, and yours humbles me. If you'll allow it, your mother and I would like to visit again, this time, to listen." I must have read it 10 times. Not because I needed his apology, but because it was the first time in my life he'd said I was right without saying it outright. I didn't reply immediately. I just folded the letter, set it on my desk, and whispered to myself. You don't need their approval anymore. But you earned their respect. And that, I realized, was the real revenge, not revenge at all. A week later, they visited. This time, there was no tension, no lecture, no unspoken disappointment. Just 3 people who'd finally learned to see each other not as titles or failures, but as humans trying their best. We had dinner by the pool, watching the sky shift from gold to indigo. My father raised his glass and said quietly, "To dreams that don't fit in anyone else's box." I smiled. To finally being proud of the right things. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the black sheep of the Caldwell family. I felt like the one who broke the curse of needing permission to shine. Later that night, standing on the balcony, I thought about all the people watching my story online. The comments were endless. I wish I had her courage. This gave me hope. Parents like that always regret it. It hit me then, my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was for every person who'd ever been told they'd never make it. Every dreamer laughed out of a room. Every soul who knew they were meant for more. So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to remember something. You don't need anyone's permission to become who you're meant to be. You don't need to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. Let your silence, your patience, and your success do the talking. Because someday, the same people who doubted you will tell your story with pride. Revenge doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the shape of peace, independence, and knowing you became everything they said you couldn't. If this story gave you chills or reminded you of your own journey, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? And remember, the best revenge is living well.